Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We will get started. Let me share my screen again. Cool. Well, it's so great to see so many people joining us from all around the world. I think I saw like Brazil, Stockholm, the Bay Area, um, honestly, a lot of different places. So welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'm Jocelyn, the head of community at Supernova. And if you're not familiar with Supernova, it's a platform where you can connect all your design data sources, create customized documentation, and also automate code delivery to scale your design system. Before we jump into our panel today, a few housekeeping items. So the webinar is recorded and we'll share it with everyone who registered via email later this week. You can also enable automated captions on Zoom if you'd like, and feel free to chat with other participants in the chat like you all are doing right now. But if you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function or else we might miss your question. And we'll also be saving time at the end for audience questions. And if there are a ton of questions, our panelists have generously agreed to answer them afterwards, and then we'll share them out on the Supernova blog so you all can get your questions answered. Cool. So today we are joined by an incredible lineup of design system experts to talk about all things design systems adoption. We'll be chatting about how to talk about your design systems and educate other teams, because not everyone in your wider organization may know what a design system is or how to best use it, what metrics to look at when you're measuring usage, and also how to increase that adoption and engagement with your design system. So let's get started first with a round of introductions. So panelists, if you could share a little bit about yourself, including your name, your pronouns, where you currently work, and how long you've been working in design systems. We will just go in alphabetical order. So Andrew, and then Cynthia, and then Maya. Cool. Andrew, if you want to kick us off.
Thanks, Jocelyn. I'm excited to be here. My name is Andrew Clark. My pronouns are he, him. I'm currently the head of design at H&R Block. And I've been working on design systems for about 5 years.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, night. I don't know where you are. My name is Cynthia Romero. I work at Pinterest. I'm a senior product designer working on the design systems team. My pronouns are she and her. I have been working like Andrew for about 5 to 6 years with design systems exclusively. Nice to meet you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maya Hampton. I'm a product manager for design systems at REI, which is an outdoor retailer in the US. My pronouns are she, her. And just like Cynthia and Andrew, surprisingly, I've been about 5.5 years working in design systems. So great to be with you all.
Amazing. Love that you all have been working on this for roughly the same amount of time. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. Let's jump right in. So one of the challenges that I frequently hear when I talk to people about like folks using their design system and adoption is that a lot of times their wider organization or like their consumer teams and product teams don't even know what a design system is, or if they do know what it is, they have their own like preconceived notions of what a design system is, and that may or may not be what you all as a design system team or design system experts want it to mean. So they may not know what that means or why it's useful. So how have you all tackled this challenge and taught your wider organization about design systems in the way that you would like them to think about it?
I can go first. Okay, so one thing that I like to say at Pinterest, everybody in my team, we say that education and adoption is a chain of events, but everything starts with education. If people, they don't know what are our components, if they don't know how to drive through our documentation, they won't be able to use it. So a bunch of the things that we do at Pinterest, we do onboarding for folks who don't know about the design systems. So we teach them what is Gestalt, our design systems, how to go through Gestalt, how to use our Figma libraries, how to use our code, Ripple. We have information also in our docs. We have pages, get started for designers, get started for engineers. we have a bunch of resource. And on top of that, we partner with the ops team, and sometimes we do branch and learn, all like systems related. And a good example, this last Friday, we just had a design systems conference. It was an internal conference where we were like telling people what is a design system, why it's important, not only like for the Pinterest employees, but for a few guests as well, like to keep this community engagement going on inside and outside of the company. So I believe education is something very important. If you want people to use your system, you need to provide resource for them to use that on the proper way. And we also have office hours, design channels to make sure that we are there to support them when they need.
Yeah, and I can layer onto some of that, like definitely education. I love the idea that you guys have your own conference. That's so cool. I would say that it really comes down to a lot of communication and, really tailoring the kind of benefits and value of the design system to who you're talking to. So if you're talking to engineers, they're going to value different aspects of a design system than designers, or kind of a product manager's leadership stakeholder groups. Are you talking about efficiency? Are you talking about, visual design consistency? Really figuring out like what that person or group of people cares about and trying to really communicate on their level. And a lot of times, like, especially if you're just starting a design system, that's even having like one-on-one conversations to like really understand, hey, you seem like you're not clear about this. Let's just have a chat about it and understand what your questions are. And I found that just really being open with communication helps to create that initial awareness that you can start building on with some of those educational channels that Cynthia was talking about.
I'm really grateful for the team. They issued our first NPS in March. We finally said, hey, we want some feedback on what we've been doing. And in that, we kind of learned, while we've been doing some things really well, we had a lot of opportunity for communication. And so we have a score and it's not where we want it to be. So by knowing that we weren't communicating, we weren't informing, we weren't maybe dispelling mistruths or truths, and that at times that's the hard work we need to be doing. It's as much as we're building or we're designing, evolving, intaking. It's like we need to be telling people this. And I think our team realized that there's a gap there. So our team said, hey, let's put it into our OKRs. So now we have an OKR around things like, are we communicating? Are we having training sessions? How often are teams understanding their version of the design system, which is not just plug and play, and our version of it, which was an evolving thing that will solve needs and need upkeep and will also increase velocity. So kudos to the team is a way of saying, this is really critical. How are people finding out about it? And then what do we need to do to improve it? And I think this year we've got a goal of four training sessions, 1 a quarter. And we'll start there and see if that really helps reframe how design systems come about and how do you work within them.
That's awesome. Maya, I'd love to double click on something you said, where you said that you have to kind of cater the story to your audience. Do you have an example you could share of when you've done that, or how you kind of found out what the right story or challenge was to talk to somebody about?
Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking back to kind of when we were initially launching our design system. And as a product manager, I was really working with a lot of other product managers to get this work on their roadmap. And so designers and developers kind of inherently understood, hey, I can reuse some code that's out there. I don't have to build from scratch. That's great. But for a product manager, it was more like, oh, this is something else I have to put on my backlog. I'm going to have to do a bunch of refactoring. Like, what's the value? And so that's where I found sitting down kind of one-on-one and, having conversations about, yes, it's work now, but in the long run, it's going to save you a bunch of work and it's going to make your team really happy and more efficient. And so, I think on the business side, that's where there was a little more of trying to understand where the hesitation was. And, on the same time, looking for opportunities like, hey, yeah, you've got a busy quarter, but maybe let's find some time on your roadmap, a little bit later, and looking for those opportunities to get adoption in there, not trying to just force people to get it, but kind of work with them and what, their specific, holdup would be.
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing. And all of y'all mentioned education, and Andrew just shared that you all have an OKR for training sessions this upcoming year. So how do you teach consumer teams how to use the design system the way you all intend? Like, what does that education like practically look like?
I love you kind of like there's two parts that the consuming team that Maya just spoke about, and then there's the design team that's adjacent to the design system team. Well, they have to kind of know what's in there. They have to know it probably really, really well. And I think is we've seen UX teams grow. One opportunity we've seen is like, are new people added to the team deeply knowledgeable of the design system itself? More important than knowledge is, do they know how to apply it? Like they could know it all, but in how they use it, how they apply it, all of a sudden we start to see it just drift. Sometimes the drift is good, sometimes it's not good. And the next layer would be our partners in development. Where are they all on that kind of maturity or awareness building? I kind of start with that team. If that team gets to very deep, 95% knowledge of applied knowledge, they know it when it comes up in conversations. They're like, it's this, here it is. We do it like now the next challenge is that consuming team, because it multiplies it. At H&R Block, we have 7 to 9 systems, 4 consumer systems, consumer facing systems. And so that just magnifies. So just getting the core team to be straight is our immediate focus. And when we're there, we're working on it. And then as we move outward, that's all influence. It's those training sessions. It's making sure that, to Maya's point, like they might not want to do it now. And I think of that as delayed gratification. It's like if you want to work out or if you want to save, those are really tough for humans. The whole species, we kind of aren't great at delayed gratification. We want it now, right now. Doing the hard work of a design system is definitely going to be something that pays off later. And so you have to be willing to say that immediately something will happen, and then eventually you're going to get all that velocity back. All the education that you put into it will pay off. All right, so someone else can go while I attend to the paper falling.
Wow, I'm impressed that Andrew has like 9 different systems. We have 1, and it's a like hell of a job to make sure that people are using that correctly. This is impressive. At Pinterest, with the education, like again, the way that we make sure that people are using that on the correct way, it's to provide good documentation, good instructions. For example, this year, like on the second half, we focused a lot on improving our documentation and our design libraries to make sure that they are easy to use for designers and also for engineers. We had Hector, part of our team. He redid the whole structure of the website to make it better and easier to understand things. We have been trying experiment with video tutorials. We use it Loom to show how to use a component. This is a new feature from Figma. How do you make sure to include that in your design file? One thing that we found on the design side and also on the code side is that people sometimes they're not using the component on the right way because maybe they don't know how to. It's not because they don't want to. For example, we found the component detached or like a poor code not using our component. What happens? What is the root cause? And we have been chatting with designers, like to Maya's point, the communication aspect of education to understand, okay, why you are not using the component the way that it's supposed to be used, what is happening. And we understood, okay, some designers, they don't know how to deal with auto layout. So let's do a Figma tips and tricks, lunch and learn, component related. So we can teach them how to like deal with auto layout, how to not detach a component. And if they need to custom the component, we have a page for our engineers how to hack a Gestalt component in the right way. Not that we want people to hack that, but if they get to do that, at least we can control and we can support to implement the component later. So we have been trying to understand the root cause, why they're not using it on the right way. So we can do trainings, we can also do one-on-ones, like office hours to explain how to use that. Sometimes we partner with designers to help them to go forward with the component. It's a bunch of things that we do in different ways. We're always like trying new ways to do that, but education is like, and communication is a huge thing for any design systems to go and to thrive.
Yeah, and I would just add on kind of like we've all mentioned, all of this education communication is really ongoing. It's not like you can just do it once and put it out there. There's really, Andrew talked about doing quarterly working sessions, or working individually with people as you see things come up, or as Figma, releases new features and everyone has to learn how to use it. It's really something to think about as more of an ongoing offering of the system is that education aspect as well to really get to using the system. And, I would, it's a little of what Andrew was talking about made me think about, that education within the team itself. And I think one of our ultimate goals is really to teach other teams how we think, if you will, or really kind of spread that idea of systems thinking. So it's not just one central team that's doing this, but like, how can we find ways not only to educate like how to use the system, but like invite them into our process a little bit to figure out how did we even get to this point and how can we kind of share that thinking as well. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of the education as well, was really how do we approach this as, sort of a durable system that can be reused and is abstracted versus more of a one-off that may has kind of limited use.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I also really love what Cincha was saying about helping people hack it so that they're doing it the right way or the way that you want them to do it instead of kind of going totally rogue. But it sounds like you all are doing a lot of different things, and it sounds like there are larger teams you're working on your design systems. I'm curious, for somebody who's just starting or maybe is a team of just one or two, what would you recommend as the first step in education? Like, would you recommend videos, documentation, an office hour? I'm guessing not the conference, but curious what you would say is like, start here and then expand into all these other things, since it is an ongoing process.
Great question. I think it can be very personal to a team, depending on who is your user, like how is the way that they learn better. I see it's cognitive sometimes. But like for me, the way that I usually start for somebody that is brand new at the company and they want to know how to use components, we do like an onboard session. On this onboard, we give like an overview, what is design systems, our components, how we work, how to collaborate with us, and we show all the resources that we have, and we give plenty of materials for people to go through. And we are there if they need any help, if they want to chat, if they don't understand like something on the documentation, we are there to support. I like to start with the overview and talking, like having a conversation, make it very like a dialogue, not I'm presenting something and you stay quiet, but like feel free to ask as many questions as you want so we can have this conversation and make sure that at least you know where to start and where to go to start using the components. For us, this is like the most effective way that we tried, starting with the onboarding sessions, and later we go with the regular support.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, but I think there's a lot of value in having some documentation. It doesn't have to be like the best, most comprehensive, polished documentation, but it gives you something that you can point to and share. And you'll definitely need to have those conversations with people, whether it's one-on-one or with a group of designers or engineers. But then you have something you can point back to, and you can use that to be like, hey, if something's missing, let me know. Or if you have questions about something there, then let me know, and that will help you kind of improve that over time. But having that documented somewhere starts to create that central like source of truth that people will start to look to, and is just more scalable than having one-on-one conversations, which may take a little more time to get to.
This might be a little counterintuitive, which is if that really is the size of your team, and that was about the size of our team 2 years ago, we didn't quickly enough reset some expectations. meaning the more you need to educate, it's probably because people are adopting it. And one question I wish we would have asked ourselves that now we're doing a much better job in measuring how we ask ourselves is, how many primary products or systems can adopt this year or should adopt? Like, do we have a team ready to educate, communicate, and do it at such a high quality that we don't kind of create gunk in the tire, the bike? Like it'll still go, the chain still goes, but man, it's like grinding and maybe it's not super smooth, but we've got the design system there. And we kind of, I think we had bias towards action, which was great. But I don't think we worked quickly enough on saying, whoa, too many. We want it everywhere, but just not right now. And that meant intakes were multiple. The person had to scale themselves in all of the educational settings. So I think we're learning now, okay, those two things are pretty related. And the deeper you educate, the more that you talk to consuming teams. That probably means consuming teams are taking the design system. And so I would, if that's really where you're at, one or two, put yourself in a place of success. I'm sure you want to get it everywhere. Also realize that will not happen if you can't do it really well every time you put it into a consuming application. And so just set some realistic expectations for yourself and then allow yourself to educate the teams that really need it. And then outwardly, kind of like maybe that just like gravity pulls teams towards you.
Yeah, I love the reframing of like setting yourself up for success and then also setting realistic expectations for both yourself and everybody you're working with, because it is really difficult to serve an entire organization, depending on how large your organization is in comparison to your team. So one thing that you all, like that Cynthia mentioned earlier, was like, what happens when people do use it incorrectly? Sometimes it's not because they don't want to use it correctly, but it's because they don't know how. So I would love to dive into like, what tactically do you all do when you see that there's a lot of detachments or people using a component or pattern or a design token or anything in your system incorrectly?
I cry. I'm kidding. I want to cry, but I don't. So again, like it ties to the education and understand why they're using that incorrectly and how we can help with that. One thing that we are trying on Pinterest right now, we created a plugin that it's internal to Pinterest. So designers, they can open the documentation inside Figma and they can get directions for the components that they're trying to use. And this plugin also does like a link. It highlights what is wrong, what are like the styles that are missing, what you need to do to fix that. So there are a bunch of things that we are trying to do with this plugin to facilitate people to use the component. One thing that we are trying to do now that is on exploration, for example, for detached components, is there a way that we can fix that and use the right one instead of detached instance? These are like things that we're trying to do with this plugin. But again, like when we see that is something wrong, we go talk to the person why it's wrong, how can we help to fix that? Is something that we can support. Maybe they are not using properly because we are missing something in our component. Is that an opportunity for us to improve that component so people can use that on the right way? And these are things that we do. We also created a handoff kit library that helps designers to hand off files. It has a bunch of annotation tools, how to properly hand off a file to an engineer, how can we improve the system's usage. These are tools that we are trying out this year. It has been great so far, so we are hoping to expand next year. But yeah, like trying to understand why they're using that incorrectly, what we need to do to fix that and to make them use that correctly. So, and also like providing quality components help, because maybe they're using that incorrectly because it's on us. We are not providing that on the right way. So maybe what we need to do to improve our documentation or maybe our components, even our code, so people, they can understand it better. Like by understanding it better, they can also use it on the right way.
Yeah, and I think it's, like Cynthia's mentioning, it really kind of comes back to the intent. And, at a high level, we want to avoid being perceived as like the design police and saying, no, don't do that. We want to be more like helpful partners. And so if we see something that's introducing like accessibility issues or causing some performance issues, then maybe we'll take a little harder line of like, hey, use something from the system for this, or let's work with you to resolve that. But I think it really comes back to intent. And, if it's unintentional, there's the education is missing, they didn't know that component existed. I think I've kind of found that often teams will more proactively be willing to resolve that. But if it was intentional, that's kind of just information we want to know. Like we know, teams out on the front lines are testing new things. They have unique uses. Understanding, was this an intentional decision? Is there something here that could be beneficial to other teams? And maybe this is something we actually support as a variant in the system because we see the success. And we don't have a lot of the more formal mechanisms. I'd love to have like kind of the plugin that checks for that. But again, it really comes down to just looking at what's going out, doing visual audits of the site as well, and being like, hey, I see you guys are using, this pattern over here. That's really interesting. Was our pattern not doing it for you, or did you not know it was there? But just kind of drilling into, again, the intent.
Andrew, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I felt like Maya and Cynthia covered it great. Like that's
Awesome.
super. I wrote a couple notes myself down.
Awesome. We love that. So kind of switching gears a little bit, let's talk more about data and measurement. So super broadly, how do you all measure adoption or usage of your design system? What are some of the data points or KPIs and OKRs that you look at?
We're diving into that in the last 6 months. I think that was a shift at H&R Block, kind of using OKRs as a way of organizing the whole organization. And also, we've intentionally as a team wanted to be more measured. We don't have a product manager, like someone in Maya's role helping us. And often there's a perception that maybe design is more subjective than it is objective. And left to their own, we would just run away with our wild whims. But most of our team, especially in the system space, is very measured. We're very much about the data and what we want to do with it. And tools like Figma actually give you quite a bit of data, which is awesome. So there's some of that there. And then tools like ADO, or if you need the Jira, those are other ways you can find out ways of looking at reporting and things that are going on in the developer space. We've kind of looked at 3 key areas: ease of use, or maybe 4, sorry, ease of use, communication, documentation, and then we have an overall NPS score. Would you recommend us? I would love that one to be much higher, and we're working on it. But then in our OKR space, we looked at more leading indicators. Let's call those lagging. It's going to take a while for us to understand, like, is the ease of use going up? What would that mean? So we started to look at like the adoption. How many of our primary products are consistently high quality adopted? We look at the design library itself. Right now, we're not where we want to be, but we have a big aim as we shift from one library to a new library that we're building. Things like unit test coverage. We're doing great. We're almost to our goal, which is fantastic. Branch coverage. So I'm kind of going down the smaller leading indicators that would show a sprint to sprint, quarter to quarter. Okay, if we do these really well, our quality will go up, our adoption will go up. And that probably means that when we ask people how likely they are to use us, or please rate the ease of our system, we're going to see those numbers move. But there'll be indicators at a much longer time frame. So kudos to Baladin on our team, Gabe, and the others that are supporting this, to kind of taking this measured approach. And I think it's starting to really pay off in our focus, and knowing what would drive more adoption and better quality for faster releases is kind of like where I know they're pointing the bigger arrow.
Yeah, I love that, Andrew. I hope that Ravi from my team was here to talk about this, because Ravi has been working a lot on adoption in our team. It's one of our main OKRs for Gestalt. And the way that we use Figma as well, but Ravi, he used the Figma REST API to create his own Fig stats board. So instead of just looking at the numbers, because numbers are important, but how do we get quality out of these numbers? So the way that Ravi did, he created this dashboard based on Figma API, where it goes like to the page of the files, like it's related to the page, and it goes to the handoff page measuring adoption inside the components. Actually, I can share, like he wrote an article for the Figma blog that explains how we measure adoption. And because it's an API, other teams, they can get inspired and do the same. It's pretty cool the way that he's doing that. But we have a bunch of tools that we rely to get data and to get metrics. For example, in our docs, to understand how people are reading and consuming our docs, we use Google Analytics, and we also do a bunch of qualitative surveys to understand better, like our data. For Figma, we use the Figma Analytics, and also we use the Fig Stats that Ravi worked so hard to get us like more quality data. And on code, we have our stats board that we have our own set of scripts to understand how components are being used on the codes, that increasing, decreasing, and why. And for our plugin that I mentioned earlier, like we also want to make sure that we have adoption for the plugin, because it's hard to get people using the plugin. So I have Mixpanel to understand how many people are using the plugin, how they use that, what are the main features. So we have a bunch of data sets that helps us to understand the adoption and what we need to do to increase the adoption.
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways we can look at adoption. So if you're just starting a system and it's brand new, you want to get to that full adoption. But what I found useful was kind of breaking down the steps into like kind of adopter levels. So like level 0, they've never heard of the design system. Like level 1, they know a little bit about it. Maybe they're doing some like technical feasibility. Can we use this? Kind of building up to like, okay, now it's on the roadmap. Now they're starting to adopt core styles. And that's a way that you can kind of see incremental adoption across like a lot of different teams. And then, we're maybe 5+ years into our design system now, and we're just getting to the point where we're able to like automate tracking of code adoption of our components. And so like definitely want to preface this of like, there's a huge range of being able to get that data. We're really excited. We're now able to like track token usage as well, which we're really excited to see how people are using tokens in addition to components. You can also look at Figma, of course, they have some analytics there and kind of comparing across design and code, what's being used. And then once you're kind of past that initial adoption, the system's always going to be releasing new stuff. And so one indicator we really look at is that ongoing adoption of new versions. So as we release new versions, we've kind of slowed our release cadence of major versions, but really auditing, the rate of adoption of new features, because we want to see like we're putting new stuff out, are people using that? If we put out a new version of the system, how long does it take a team to update to that as well? So again, it's really one of this like ongoing things, right? Adoption is really not just a moment of time, and there's a lot of ways you can slice and dice it, but a lot of good ideas here. I love this conversation.
And one of the things you mentioned, Maya, is like you all have been doing this for 5+ years, and now you're starting to get even more data and automating that. So for folks who are just kind of getting started or just don't have access to that much data or a data team, what are some signals that they can rely on instead?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you are using Figma, they do have some data in there. Otherwise, I think it's like kind of visually auditing the site. If you're introducing any sort of different, a new primary button color, that's an indicator. So you can kind of visually look around the site or apps, whatever you're supporting. I think also kind of looking at things like how many people are coming to your office hours or your kind of educational workshops, how many people are reaching out for help, and kind of measuring that engagement with yourself or the system team to really like get some of that data, even if it's on a one-to-one basis. And again, just talking to people, were you able to use a design system component for this? Like why or why not? How did it help you? Just starting to build some of that. And ultimately that starts to give you more of these, kind of small wins or success stories or learnings that you can take back to the team and build on over time.
Awesome, thank you. And what are some ways that you all have increased the usage and engagement of your design system? Did those tactics vary from like team to team or role to role, like Maya was saying earlier, where you kind of have to cater the education? Did you also have to cater your strategies and tactics between designers and developers or even PMs?
We try it so many ways because we know like a big part of adoption is engagement, people using it and understanding how to use that. We tried advocate systems where we have a cohort of designers that they chat with other designers, they promote adoption within the company. Other ways that we found helpful is also joining other design crits, giving our input from the systems mindset side, so we can help folks to understand more about components, about documentation, how to use them. We have this embedded partnership where we have the systems designer working with a feature designer and an engineer to represent the component side. We also do consultants. We have people who are pretty strong on accessibility in our team. So maybe they need help with accessibility. Our components, they have accessibility as definition of done. So if they use our components, they can be way there on the accessibility side. They can help with that. And these are like some ways, and also like creating these events. For example, we had this conference internal, we had some external guests. It was a full day with talks and sessions about design systems. And we invited folks from other companies. We have people from Sprout Social, Grammarly, Neon. Last year we had Spotify, Meta. Like we invite folks from other design systems to show how great it is to have a design systems, how much it benefits the company, the users, and the business. By showing that and sharing knowledge, it helps a lot. We strongly believe that design system, it is a community effort, it's a service design, we are there to support others. And by showing how helpful it is to have a design systems, how it can speed up the workflow, and how it can help them to have more quality as well on the code and also on the design side. It helps us to engage. And we have been found it very helpful, like driving these sessions and inviting guests and chatting with other folks. It brings people more excited to use design systems and also to connect with other folks and learn from others as well.
I'll pick up on that thread of like building new case studies out. We've done a few where the team adopted or a new pattern was adopted, and we kind of looked back and said, hey, we accelerated a release. We had less defects. The journey through many systems or micro applications was way more consistent. And that's a good thing for the user. There's the aesthetic heuristic, which is about like things that feel good and look good. It matters just as much as the proximity heuristic. Those were ways of us saying, we're not just telling you this, it's real. And that's helped some teams say, okay, I see the benefits. Of course, it's still a matter of time, like always when. The other thing the team we've looked at is our effectiveness, ease of use or the speed of delivery. And a really positive note is the teams that are using it, teams that have adopted it, their NPS or the effectiveness scores are really high. So we know that we're doing something right, maybe a small amount, but something's right. And the teams that bring it together are putting work into the consumer or a tax pro's hands faster than other teams that aren't. And it tends to be more consistent. And of course, I didn't speak about let's say the quality of life, like how you do those things, like they're easier or they're faster, less defects. And that matters to the developer and to the designer instead of kind of having to find all those things out afterwards. So there's a quality of life that we've seen in those teams. So that's the effectiveness is one way of we've been looking at how adoption is a way to spread the word.
And I would just add on tactically to increase adoption. What we had a lot of success with was finding like kind of parallel initiatives we could take advantage of. So after we spun up the design system, we learned that there was plans to create a new microsite framework for our front end and create a bunch of templates. And so we prioritized getting our design system integrated in those templates. So as people migrated to that new framework, they would get the design system for free. We also had kind of a rebranding moment where we changed kind of some of the core typography and color styles of the REI brand. And we utilized that moment as a way to say, hey, adopt the design system, you'll get these new updates, and you're going to get all the other future updates. And if we can coordinate this release, we can all get it at the same time. And so, both of those were kind of high profile enough initiatives that we could get some leadership support as well. We could get on people's roadmaps, and kind of going back to like getting on the roadmap. It's really finding that opportunity where you see a window to take advantage of. So I'd be on the lookout for that type of parallel work streams as well that you can just jump on it.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Ask you for some notes on that. We're a bit under the hood in how we show up in our identity and brand, and we've been talking about some of the ways that we want to do that really well. So I'm going to definitely speak to you afterwards on, okay, what were the pitfalls? What worked really well? That's really timely.
Perfect.
Cool. So it looks like we have about 15 minutes left. So there are several Q&A questions. So folks in the audience want to go check those out and upvote the ones that you want us to tackle first. Feel free to do that. But before we move on to those, I do have one final question for our panelists. What's a hot take that you have related to design systems and driving adoption?
I would say, like, for me, it's show the benefits, what the design systems bring, not only to the product, to the users, but also to the business. It saves time, it speeds up the workflow, it saves money, most important too for the business. So, and also make sure that you're showing that to designers, they can understand. Like in our case, we focus a lot on accessibility at Pinterest. Like we are trying to be loyal to the mission of Pinterest, that it's bring inspiration like to everyone. So we really want to meet everyone, at least on the design system side, showing how accessible, how inclusive are our components, and also that we are there to help. We are not like, even that we are like some people, they see systems designers as the police of the company. You can't do that, this is wrong, and blah blah. We are not like that. We are like the opposite. We're there to help, and showing that, being like very supportive and friendly to our users inside Pinterest. It's a way that we can get engagement, and also like communicating with other areas within the company. For example, we have a very good relationship with the brand team. We do like weekly things. How can we align brand and design systems, and bringing people together to work with systems, embedding folks inside other teams. It helps a lot to drive engagement. And I think like the most important is the sentiment. How people are feeling about the design systems, what do we need to do better? We do like the survey where we track the sentiment. How is the sentiment of people related to our docs, to our design libraries, to our code, repo? Like we go to all areas to understand what is bad and what is good. And I think if people feel happy, they feel that we're helping them, it's a good way to keep like driving adoption. So this is the way that we try to go. I'm not saying that's the right way, but it has been working for us.
Oh, hot take. There's no time like the present. Like action has an expiration. So you should do it. Adopt it. Like imagine the world where that wasn't a choice. That's the hot take. Just adopt the design system. I think we love to be in a world of, I would like to have it all, but I definitely don't want to do the work, and I would like it right now. And that's part of it. That's life. But imagine that action has an expiration, and there is nothing better than adopting any or your design system as soon as possible. Now, I know I just said that kind of overwhelmed our team at one point, but you asked for a hot take, and that would be my hot take to other teams.
Fair enough.
I feel like my hot takes we've kind of already gotten to, but like I think a big one, kind of to Andrew's point, is like be opportunistic. Like where is a team or a designer or an engineer that is enthusiastic about the design system? You know, maybe they're not the most visible part of the product, but you know, just trying to get some momentum, get some small wins, get the ball rolling, start learning, and build on that. I think another point we've kind of talked about is like adoption is really an ongoing journey, and you know, good adoption isn't necessarily like everything is using 100% of the design system. So also be kind of realistic about what does good adoption look like for our team. It's going to be different in every organization as well. How can we, you know, get out there, get some wins, see what value we have, and then learn from that to build on it.
Awesome. Thank you all. So we have like 13 questions, and some of them are definitely more popular than others. So thank you all so much for reviewing and upvoting while we did the hot takes. First one, have you figured out how much documentation is enough documentation? I'm curious to learn more about the balance between enabling the right autonomy without having to write dense, comprehensive content.
That's a great question. Honestly, I don't know that we've figured it out. I think, you know, Cynthia was talking about onboarding documentation earlier. We spent a lot of time focusing on that as well. And that's one area where you can kind of see the results of, you know, were they able to get up and running using the documentation? That's a great indicator. But, you know, we found as well that teams will, while they look at the design system documentation a lot while they're getting started, they get to a point where it's like, oh, I know what's in there. I don't need to go back and look at it. Or it's really just a reference to find a token name. And so I think that's a great question. Like we certainly look at the analytics and try to look at what content people are looking on. But that's something we try to be diligent about as well. And also the idea of maybe it doesn't have to be, you know, completely comprehensive to get it out the first time, but you can always kind of add in more nuance and detail as you learn it or as you understand it, and then try to find ways to share that. But I would expect to spend some time doing documentation. I think that's part of the role.
Yeah, to add to that, oh, sorry. Like to Maya's point, I think this is super like important what she was mentioning. Like it's you don't need to have this super comprehensive, but have something out there. I think like baby steps, like if you don't know, okay, what is enough, start with something like, for example, what are the core components for your company? What are the core needs for the product team? And start with that. And you can do surveys, chat with engineers, with designers. Okay, what do you need to get better on the documentation? And you go iterative from that. At least you have something. And you can figure out as you go what is enough. It kind of depends for like from company to company, from team to team, but start with baby steps and focus on the core needs and core components.
I just want to add 3 tactics that aren't really the design system tactics. One of them I stole from Leslie Witt, who's the chief design officer at Headspace. We have 6 hours of group critique with our product partners, IT partners every week. That is the best way to notice and look at, is that using the component? That seems like it's off, that option summary card or that button radio button is not being used the right way. And the whole team is participating in that. Second tactic, intake. Get a very routine intake. And that's your best way of saying what's new, what do we like, what do we want to evolve. And the third tactic I would say is making sure that without looking at Figma, just do spot checks. Like take a look at a file, either at the design manager level or at the lead level. And this is not about finding mistakes, about capturing accidents like, oh, I like what they did there. That's not how we thought about it. Let's put that into the next quarter's evolution, maybe of that piece. And again, you don't have to take action. You're just saying, we'll do that then once we get it through intake. But kind of going through and having a spot check mentality, I think it builds a level of intentionality from multiple levels into the work. And that way you don't have to always be looking at Figma and what's going on in the tool.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question related to documentation. Once you have all these great pieces of documentation and information about using the system, how do you make sure users are consuming it. So, and then a follow-up was kind of related, but also more about like, how much effort should you really be putting into documentation over other efforts? Like in terms of prioritization of all the things going on in your design system, how would you prioritize that? So that was a two-parter. One, how do you get folks to consume your documentation? And two, how much effort do you put into documentation?
This is timely because last year we made a concerted effort to do documentation. We felt like that was where the focus needed to be. And it also meant we weren't going to evolve pieces, or we'd have to do them very, very surgically. But we felt like a new designer or developer going into it, how would they know how to use it right? So we were just increasing the issues we were having by not having the documentation great. But we do not have an unrealistic expectation of it. It will not be 100%. It will never be perfect. It will not solve all the don'ts and do's and tips and tricks. You're going to need to talk to somebody and use it. But our focus is on the documentation effort because that's scalable. That is 1 to 1,000, 1 to 100. It's much easier than to say, okay, we've given them an awesome race car. It is a very fast race car. We've controlled for all the engine, all the tires. It's a good one. Now we can identify, actually, it's just a designer that's kind of being a rogue designer. Like they just always want to do their own thing. That's not bad. It's just not always what you need. So we kind of are isolating the variables that way, but we are saying, hey, you've got an amazing Formula One car. We have tuned it up. Now you can really be confident in using it. And that's kind of been our approach for documentation. I think I only answered one part, but I'll let Cynthia or Maya answer both.
Yeah, so to get folks to read the documentation, we try to do a bunch of communication. For example, we have weekly, now bi-weekly digests that we share every 2 weeks with design pointing to our documentation and making it excited for people to read. We also have our newsletter that we point a bunch of highlights that the team did, that the documentation got updated to get folks to go to the documentation and read that. Another way that we go, like we measure the access on Google Analytics, how many people are going to the docs. Do we need like to increase that or that piece of the documentation to make sure that we drive attention? The level of effort that we put on documentation, it's huge. Like we even have an OKR to improve documentation comprehension. Why? Because it's our source of truth. It's the place that designers go, engineers go to understand how to use a component. All of our components, they have best practices, do's and don'ts, accessibility, how to implement this. Everything people need to know about like the component, it's there. If you don't put effort on that, maybe we're like telling people to use a token, but we don't explain how to use that token, where to apply that token. So we wanted to make sure that we have super granular in our documentation and people, they will understand how to use a thing if they go there. And if they don't, they come to us. But we wanted to minimize like a lot of people coming to us all the time because we should have it out there for them to consume. So for us, documentation, it's a big part of the design systems for engineers and for designers. Yeah. And the way that we make sure that people are reading, it's communicating, spreading it out. Like as much as like all the times that we have a chance to promote our documentation within the company, we do. Because we wanted to make sure people, they know about the updates, they know what is coming up. We try to be pretty transparent about everything that we do on Gestalt, so people, they can trust on us, like we can build trust and they can go to the documentation as a source of truth.
I love that we're talking about documentation in here. It's something our team certainly, we prioritize component documentation as well as like a design and code asset for every new release and make sure that we really have all three of those parts to go together. This last year, we actually finally spent some time redesigning our documentation site, which was on our backlog for years and years and years, and finally got around to it. So it's tough to, find the time to prioritize these things that feel more of like internal facing, but ultimately that can create a lot of value. And like Cynthia was saying, really just continuing to add valuable information on there and share those links out, put the release notes on there, share links to the release notes in emails and Slack channels and all those different places. And just try to, when people ask questions, if there's, it's already answered in the documentation, just kind of like gently point them there and try to create that habit of looking to the source of truth to get that information.
Yeah, I think not just in design systems, but just in like support or helping folks in general, it's always really helpful to answer their core question and then link back. So what was that page on the reference site where they can learn more so that they can go there? And then, like to Andrew's point, it is the most scalable thing compared to one-on-one conversations or even these training sessions. If folks know they can look at the documentation, they can always go there. And then in terms of like writing, what we actually have a blog post from Luke Finch, who was at NewsKit, and he wrote a lot about like documentation being about the way you talk, and it's not just like the reference site, but it's your notes, it's all of these things. So I'll share that blog post so folks can take a look at it, because ideally your documentation isn't super dense. Ideally you're using plain English, you're using visual examples, and it's something that people want to consume, and it doesn't feel like they're reading like the dictionary.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that an important piece of a design systems, if your team can have a content designer, it's a huge plus. Unfortunately, we don't have a person dedicated in our team, but we do have partners. We work with content designers inside Pinterest. They can help us to shape the documentation. It's so important to have like a good language. So people, they will understand. We are not like going too technical for people who are new to the system. So it's super important. If you have an opportunity to have a content designer on design systems team, it's a huge plus. It's my dream. One day we'll have it. But why we don't have a partner with them so they can help us to review the documentation and to fix things to make it easier to digest.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. We are actually right on time. I know we have more questions, so thank you all so much earlier for agreeing to answer them. And we'll post that as a blog post and also share out the recording. But thank you, Andrew, Cynthia, and Maya, so much for answering these questions and sharing so many great tips, tricks, and advice. Yeah, thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you guys. Great conversation.
Bye.